Thank you for joining us today as we continue our conversation on building an inclusive classroom. Today, we're specifically going to talk about relationship tune-ups. This is part one, so make sure you stay tuned for part two. My name is Jahari Sykes-Ratliff.
I'm Carrie Cormier.
And first, we'd like to share with you that we come from the LRC-South, where our professional development is catered to meet your needs. There's also a production center in James Hall on Rowan University's campus. We have here the location where you can come check out many of the resources that we have, as well as some additional professional development opportunities that are offered through the LRC-South, which is a DOE project promoting the practices of inclusive education through the provision of resources, services, and professional learning opportunities. So here's a little bit more about what the LRC has to offer related to services, professional development, and family and community supports. And we also have a free membership available now. So please check out the LRC South, and here's the website below, as well as a QR code. So today we are going to dig a little deeper into defining and understanding social emotional learning, which is something that has been interwoven throughout this series on building an inclusive classroom. And we're also going to define trauma-informed practices. So we're going to ask that we all have the same expectation in terms of the norms and how we will treat one another. And so I'll run through those very quickly. We value everyone's thoughts, opinions, and we treat everyone with respect. There's no such thing as stupid questions. We want to share the air and make sure everyone has a chance to contribute to the conversation. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes, and we're going to give and get grace. The objectives today are that you'll be introduced to an introductory video to help you to better understand how to strengthen relationships through the exploration of social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices. After viewing this video, you'll be able to define and identify examples of social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices.
All right, so let's dive in. So exploring social emotional learning. We know that social emotional learning can enhance relationships through family, community, school partnerships, which can advance equity initiatives in schools, as well as empowering students, faculty, and families through positive relationships, which can contribute to strengthening communities. So really taking a community-based approach to social emotional learning, that it's not something that just falls on classroom teachers. And we have this quick video here from Castle that goes over some of the core competencies of social emotional learning.
Think about the young people in your lives and all the different places where they're learning about themselves, how to relate to others, and work together on goals. How can we intentionally create learning experiences that will help all young people develop and maintain positive relationships, become lifelong learners, and contribute to a more caring, just world? Educators, researchers, community members, families, and the students themselves agree. What we need is social and emotional learning, or SEL. SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? Castle's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize, even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL skills and also can practice and apply SEL during core subjects, like discussing different perspectives in social studies and language arts, or collaboratively problem solving in science or math. SEL is most effective when supported by evidence-based programs and trusting relationships where students are treated as partners in their learning. Beyond the classroom, SEL can be intentionally promoted throughout the school experience, from the way they're greeted in the morning to how discipline practices are carried out, and how adults themselves develop and model positive relationships and the SEL competencies. Outside of school, families and caregivers provide the earliest and ongoing learning and interactions for their children. So it's important that schools listen to and authentically partner with families to help shape SEL priorities and strategies for supporting their children. Similarly, when schools partner with community organizations to align their efforts, SEL opportunities can be strengthened and students benefit even more. With SEL, we can help create schools and learning spaces where all young people feel connected, inspired, engaged, and ready to contribute to the world around them.
And so I think one of the key things for us to think about here as educators is that social emotional learning helps us to care for the whole child, right? Holistically think about how we are helping students grow and make progress, not just as students, but just as humans in the world. And so really recognizing that it isn't just an add-on, it's something else that we need to do, but as the folks at Castle point out, it is something that we can easily embed into our curriculum, and it's things that we are already doing.
And then if I could just add, Carrie, what I really loved that I heard was authentic partnerships with families. And I think oftentimes it can be frustrating when you have families that don't engage with you or their child as much as you may need them to, or parents that are making the connections, but it's important to also develop with them some goals, because SEL doesn't end once they leave your classroom, right? And so the work that you're doing with families also may be helping to build those structures at home that parents may not even recognize is missing, no matter how engaged they are. You could be highly engaged, but at home that might not be something you're cognizant of building. And so the things that you're doing in your classroom to ensure that you're meeting the self-awareness goals and the regulation, everything, the 5 core components that we just heard about, those can be replicated in the home. And the way that we do that is through building those authentic partnerships in order to see what the need is and how we can meet it.
Yes, certainly. And teachers do not have to take on everything on their own. It's really emphasizing that we are partners as teachers and as parents and family members as well. And so with that, also thinking of social emotional learning, we also need to talk about trauma-informed practice. And this is particularly relevant as, nationwide and even locally here in New Jersey, we are seeing increases in student trauma, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic. So looking at trauma-informed practices, one of the key ideas that we really talk about are these ideas of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And so ACEs will lead to negative behaviors at school, maybe even at home, and they can lead to more risky behaviors later in life. And so if we don't address adverse childhood experiences, students' brain development can be impacted, their abilities in school and in life can be negatively impacted as well. And so we also need to think about the different types of trauma that are identified by the National Institute of Mental Health. So we have single event trauma, which could be something like a natural disaster, a school shooting, a death in the family, a death of a friend. That would be a single event that causes trauma, or students can be experiencing complex trauma. So if you consider housing or food insecurity, poverty, discrimination, that could be multiple small events over time that build up and become complex trauma. But with strong support, those traumatic experiences do not necessarily lead to prolonged stress responses. So again, we need to make sure that we are addressing trauma when we see it, either single event or complex trauma, because it does, affect our physical brain development and our mental health development. So really making sure that we are aware of trauma that students are experiencing. So when we think about the types of adverse childhood experiences and trauma, the CDC in this graphic here recognize abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction.
So directly connected to abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. Neglect is physical and emotional. And household dysfunction is mental illness, incarcerated relative, substance abuse, mother treated violently, and divorce.
And so some of these, again, are very common amongst our students and what they are experiencing in their lives. And again, can lead to either single event trauma or complex trauma that builds over time. Some other events that can lead to trauma is bullying, school shootings, even just being aware that school shootings are happening. It may not be at their school per se, but just knowing that is a possibility that can cause anxiety and fear and concern. And I think about, the school shooting drills and lockdown drills and things that we have. You can also think about violence at home or in the community, just knowing that it is, happening somewhere in the student's home community, maybe not at their home in particular, but just around them. You can also think about the death of a close friend or family member, homeless or housing insecurity, poverty, or systematic discrimination.
Mm-hmm. So in order to make sure that we're being responsive to trauma that our children may be experiencing, we need to make sure that we're constructing learning environments that are breeding a feeling of safeness and security. We want to make sure that the core of everything that we're pushing out to our children, embedded in our lessons and activities, the climate that we're attempting to create in our classroom, are all grounded in positive relationships. We want to make sure that the students and even your colleagues know and can recognize trauma-induced behaviors. Trauma-induced behaviors are minimized or should be minimized in order to enhance student learning. That's literally the goal. And so oftentimes we see children that may exhibit some challenging behaviors, and you may think like, this kid is just a tough cookie, or I heard a teacher before say he's just spicy, like he just has a lot of spice to him and he wants to do what he wants to do. But sometimes these are the children, the faces of trauma. And if we're not digging deep and building relationships, that information may not be revealed to you. And then you have the student that's like, we like to call good and quiet, and they do their work, and all these like really positive terminology we're attaching to them, but they may be the ones that are holding on to a lot of things they've seen or experienced, and they live with trauma as well. So that's why it's important that our learning environment is constructed in a way where, regardless of how this trauma may manifest itself, I feel comfortable coming to you as my teacher, who I'm with for the majority of my day, to say, this is what's going on in my life. This is something I saw, or this is something I witnessed, or this school shooting has me scared to come to school. Like Carrie said, the result of things that happen outside of sometimes their direct proximity still has an impact. So we need to be very real about that and have conversations and use them to create more of an opportunity to talk about what's going on in the world, and then reinforcing that this is a safe place for you. Not just saying it, but how are we making sure that your classroom feels like it as well?
And I think even acknowledging as teachers and as educators that we cannot solve trauma, right? We, as much as we want to, and as much as we care about our students, we cannot solve their trauma alone, right? That is where, again, the SEL component of community partnerships really comes into play, is that that is not a single person, like not a single person can solve those issues. But also, I think it is important for us as teachers to acknowledge that we can take a step back and recognize behaviors, like Jahari was saying. Is it something that, if a student is acting a particular way, like, is it that is their only way to feel a sense of control, and that they need to have a sense of control in their lives and in what's going on? So really kind of taking a moment to pause, where is this behavior coming from? What might be causing this? What might be making this or causing this to manifest in the student? And so really, again, taking a step back and being a teacher who knows their students and knows their students very well, so that you can kind of have that perspective of, where is this coming from?
Definitely. And so social emotional learning and trauma sensitive practices, particularly around social emotional learning, it helps the students to develop their social and self-awareness, fostering healthy decision-making skills, developing self-management skills, and building those positive relationships. And then children that have experienced trauma, they need to feel safe. They need to be surrounded by positive and caring adults. They need to feel successful, and they need choices over tasks that help to develop their sense of agency. So 3 major takeaways from this video. Part 1, social emotional learning the goal is to empower students. We want to make sure we're fostering positive relationships, and all of this is done in efforts to advance educational equity. Trauma can be caused by either single events or complex factors or events that build over time. And trauma-informed schools should respond to trauma-induced behaviors to make learning accessible to all children. So as we close out, here are our references that were used for the content of this presentation. And we would love for you to connect with LRC through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.